This is the big picture track. You're in an Augustus 3 and 4. We are here to hear about legal aspects of cyberspace operations from Robert Clark.
Siri, please open my Blackhat presentation. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. I knew I shouldn't have put that on the iPad, but go ahead and watch. All right, welcome. Good afternoon. I know why you're here. I put a sleepy topic in a month and a half ago, and all of a sudden this New York Times thing, bookseller, this big, book came out. So I know that's why you're here. It's an exciting book. You want to get right to the point and talk about it immediately. So let's get to 50 Shades of Cyber. This was such a good and exciting book that they did a sequel, 50 Shades of More Cyber, followed by 50 Shades of More Cyber, because you just can't have enough cyber in the world. The other big picture news that's going on clearly, I think that has been out there, is the new Yahoo CEO. This was not a surprise to me. I saw that when she wasn't in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue that she probably was going to be free and had more time. I didn't realize she was so technical and that... what? Mayor. Google that right. That makes. Why do I have my hand up to my ear and I don't have an earpiece? Doing a bad Jon Stewart imitation? Because I'm just trying to get on the Daily Show someday. All right, the agenda. This would be my agenda, but again, I'm responding to you. You want to go in this order because you want to talk about computer network attacks. You want to talk about hacking back. If you're still sticking around after that, we'll get into computer network exploitation and look at computer network security and defense. I sat in the defense track earlier yesterday, and the proctor for that one had this aspect of if any time you said the word cyber, there you go. My beef with that is when I got involved in this, it was computer network operations. The problem is I am a creature of being in DC now, and the big thing in DC is cyber is sexy. And so if you need funding for anything, you have to use the word cyber. So like if you needed porta potties, if you said they're cyber potties, you would get funding for it. I'm going to try, I try to stay away from that and be old school. Disclaimer, I'm going to talk fast, so you'll have to listen slow, so we go through this. Now the real disclaimer, I am here in a personal capacity, and I have learned very well about being in a personal capacity. I am on vacation. I am literally on vacation. But for the media that's out there, I've learned a couple lessons. Don't write, United States Army Cyber Command lawyer said. Write something along the lines of somebody in a personal capacity speaking too fast. Don't write, according to an officer from U.S. Army Cyber Command. Write, somebody from the Navy, Air Force, or Marines said on that. And don't write, we attack at dawn. Please write, the Emperor has made a critical error and the time for our attack has come. And if those don't work for you, you can always fall back on the famous one, you can't handle the truth. But of course, I suggest that you check with some other agencies before you start doing all that. I have not. I expect a couple lawsuits when we're done here today. Again, I hope to be informative, yet entertaining aspect. I like to keep everybody awake after lunch, and I'm still on vacation. So, my background, and taking into consideration that I am here in a personal capacity, there's my background. It looks like many of you have seen this. It looks like your typical FOIA request that you will get on that. And again, I have no additions or deletions from my curriculum vitae or my resume, and I don't have a computer science degree. Who can tell me who this is? Not you, but who can tell me who this is? It's the teacher from the paper chase. That was just what I was going for, because as a lawyer, you should be specific. Be specific, Bob. So wait, I heard it out there. Somebody shout out the guy's name and the character. Well, that's the actor. His name, actually in the movie, is Kingsfield. And when my generation was going to law school, this was like a must-watch because it really showed the Socratic method of how law school is taught, where your professors actually ask questions, getting you to think, and you provide the answers. So that's part of this. And I got asked because I have some colleagues here, and they're like, should we hold our questions? And I'm like, well, not if you want to get to the $1 million giveaway. So I have the $1 million giveaway for either getting $5, $10, maybe even $25. And if that's not enough, I have this really neat gold coin to give away that looks like doing something with the Olympics. And that's the only time I'm going to use the word Olympics in this talk. So for the best question, comment, or anything, you can win basically $1 million. Now, I'm giving you basically the first start to that, the 5, the 10, the 15 on that. And you have to go out in the casino and make it into $1 million. And again, being a lawyer, I do get a third of that if you make that to that point. All right, last disclaimer aspect on life. If you ask, this is a 60-minute pitch. If I talk really fast, I can do it in 20 minutes. If you got another lawyer up here, this would become 4 or 5 hours, because we would debate the idiosyncrasies of the legal realm going back and forth. Because if you ask the same question of 2 different lawyers, you will get 2 different answers. Because typically if you ask a lawyer what's 1 + 1, they'll say, what do you want it to be? And so from this aspect on life, I am not your lawyer. Please ask questions at any time. I'm doing this more from, again, a Socratic-type aspect of it, and we will get into things. Final thought for my presentation, being here in Vegas, I like quoting important people like vice presidents. And I got to thank Blackhat. It is an absolute pleasure to be at the last Blackhat USA ever here. It is absolutely, I'm so pleased. I was talking to Ping earlier, and Ping goes, the dates for Abu Dhabi are December 10th through 13th. And I wasn't sure if the world was ending on the 21st or the 12th, and I thought, wouldn't the 12th be cool? I could be in Abu Dhabi if they picked me up, and that would be a great way, to celebrate it. United States, cybersecurity, law and policy must be founded on law. And from that aspect, everything that you've got going on out there that we're doing at the federal level for the government must either find some basis in either the Constitution, a statute, international law, from that aspect. Your sources of policy are going to be your executive orders and presidential directives. And those things are only as good as they are based on either the Constitution or a statute as we're going forward and doing cybersecurity. This is a pretty damn good document. Now, our forefathers had a lot of foresight. Not enough, because the word cyber isn't in here. On that, you would have thought, and it's the entire operating manual for 330 million people. Your operating manual for your computer is like 12 times as long, translated into 5 different languages. But this is a damn good document for, like I said, 330 million people and any numerous household pets. The nice aspect of this is, being a government attorney, my bosses say, at the end of the day, you get to do the right thing. Stick within that document, do the right thing, and we're good. Which means if I find myself in front of a court with a wonderful organization like EFF or the ACLU arguing something, and I'm arguing something over here, at the end of the day, when they make that determination, they should make that determination based on the arguments and the briefs. And if the government can't carry it at the end of the day, they shouldn't carry it at the end of the day. The flip side of that is, if the other side can't, they shouldn't. So it's a great document, and it's nice to stay within the 4 corners of that. The way your process works, which is going to come kind of important when we get to computer network attack, this particular document here explains at the national security staff level how they make your policy, that interagency aspects of getting issues in front of the president to make a final determination. So if you ever want to find out how this works, that's the document to go grab and take a look at. So, your cybersecurity policy, top down. In 2003, they wrote the cybersecurity strategy, and then you got your international strategy and the DoD strategy that nests within the international strategy. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. We will talk about that a little bit later as we get into this now. But there are certain aspects of what we declared using that international strategy and what the DoD strategy said along with it. You're nobody, if nobody in DC, if you don't have one hell of a confusing organization chart. And so there you've got it. You've got a cybersecurity coordinator that has to respond through the National Economic Advisor and the National Security Advisor. So really he has 2 bosses prior to going up to the president from that aspect of life. and he's in charge of doing your cybersecurity policy. The main thing that I think you're aware that the government's focused on is the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. 12 initiatives going on there, moving forward to advance cybersecurity. The big focus that they're moving on really is going to be those first three there, the trusted internet connections, the deploying passive sensors, which is your intrusion detection system, and moving that towards the intrusion prevention systems. As a matter of fact, as Howard Schmidt was leaving, he said that there. We're looking at the TIC and our continuous monitoring of federal systems. So that's kind of an overview at the high level. I've never put that out there. It's kind of nice for a little background information. Computer network operations. Computer network attack. Anytime you can call out one of your colleagues and put them front and center, do it, outside the fact that it is on a Fox News website. So you can't believe everything you read. See, you can't believe everything you read. We're not engaged in a cyber war. It's from Fox. No one's going to buy that. If Jon Stewart tells me, yeah, then I'm going to listen. Computer network attack. So I like this from CNN. The 4 ways for the internet going down. I'm not a tech guy. I'm a lawyer. I did the easy thing. I didn't know space had weather. But then cyber warfare could take the internet down, although I don't buy it. I came across this blog, and I'm a sick person. I actually laughed when I saw this. So we're supposed to hook up the grid to Silk Road because when the internet goes down, Silk Road will stay up, and our energy grids will stay up from this aspect too. And I thought, that's pretty. I like that. All right, I can go with that. Computer network attack. That's what everyone wants to know. Is it an act of war? Now, if it's an act of war against me, a nation state, I have the right to declare war. But we don't declare wars anymore. They've kind of fallen into disuse. And well, as far as declaring the war has fallen into disuse. But going back to this blog piece, I kind of like this because his big complaint was, I don't hear anybody talking about peace. I hear everybody talking about cyber war. So I would like to be the first. And if there's one takeaway that I'd love to see repeated on this one, this would be it. The law of armed conflict is a regime to cover peacetime and conflict. It's not to cover conflict, it's to cover peacetime, moving towards the conflict spectrum. And as we do this just came out. All the bosses of the service cyber commands testified yesterday in front of the House Armed Service Committee, Emerging Threats. And this piece here said that we haven't updated how we do this, the rules of engagement, since 2005. They're old. They need to be updated. I got news for them. Law of armed conflict was developed under the Lieber Code in 1863. So we've been applying law of armed conflict for a long time. Just because the fact that this was written in 2005 doesn't mean as lawyers and lawyers for the government, I'm not going to be applying the law of armed conflict and following that. Looking in that realm, under the United Nations Charter, Article 2.4, nations are supposed to refrain from the threat or the use of force. 2 exceptions: if the Security Council says, yeah, go ahead and go into Kuwait, or if self-defense is there. Now, the self-defense charter for this, our article, comes under 51 that says you have the right to self-defense if you're faced with an armed attack. The United States has never made a distinction between the use of force and an armed attack. And under customary international law, the standard was always a use of force, vice the words armed attack. And so from that aspect, all armed attacks are a use of force, but not all use of force are an armed attack. So from that aspect, the United States has not negotiated that away. Use of force. So if I've got unauthorized intrusions into my unclassified government information system, is that a use of force? Well, if that's the Department of Interior, who's going to, they were told to disconnect from the internet. They were so hosed up in Cobell. So, maybe, maybe not. What if I've got, by the way, I heard somebody say, yes, that's a use of force. Coordinated computer network intrusions. But, again, facts are king, so we got to ask a couple more facts. What are those systems that we're looking at? Nation's air traffic control system shuts down. Hey, now I'm on page 6 of Richard Clark's cyber warfare book. Hey, banking financial systems offline, page 7. Floodgates, I'm at page 15. Death, destruction, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. We're at, a level of calling out, Ghostbusters. Now, unclassified military logistics systems. Hey, is that going to start inhibiting my movement and responding to a crisis in the world from that aspect? Interfering with my chances or my capabilities to do military operations? Interesting aspects. So, I like quoting smarter people than myself. Charles Dunlap, former Judge Advocate General, TJAG of the Air Force. Again, non-insertion of cyber capabilities on systems without any kind of destruction from that. Use of force, armed attack, not so much. As long as it's lying there, that's computer network exploitation. So, one other aspect that we look at with this is law of armed conflict applies to nations. So, individuals doing this, I don't apply the law of armed conflict against individuals unless I can prove effective state control from that aspect. So if I've got individuals doing this, hey, I'm looking to law enforcement to solve my problems for that aspect. Yes? Okay, so the question was in the aspect of gray goose. Now, the reason I have to give you the $5 chip is because this is actually outside of drinking their vodka the first time I've heard of gray goose. So I will give you your $5 chip for that aspect on life. Now, if you're talking about Georgia, the question was, hey, if you can't prove state sponsorship, and that's the Georgia and Estonia aspect on life, is that gray goose? Yeah. Give me my chip back. See how that lawyer thing works? Pretty good. All right, Georgia and Estonia was actually that, and that was the aspect of it. Because they couldn't attribute it back to nation-state actors from that aspect, they couldn't make that next step to apply law of armed conflict, in which they said, basically it was a huge, like Korea, police action. It was the aspect of having to deal with law enforcement to respond to that. So that's one of the pieces on that. I've got to get it back to state actors on this. Would the Great Firewall of China go into state control? Okay, so going back to facts again, so how's that going to be used? So the Great Firewall of China can determine where people inside the country can go outside that. Okay, so you would have to tie that back to my constitutional authority from that aspect on what role the United States government has to affect, under our laws and Constitution, people's rights in China to get outside from that aspect of it. Chinese control. Right. Attacking us? Oh, so you're talking about the independent actors, allegedly, in China that are not connected to state sponsorship, hacking our systems. I've never heard of that. Although, everyone says, damn, they're noisy. So I guess we're hearing a lot about that. So from that aspect, yeah, boy, you got to love that aspect of it. So, again, you have to get back to proving the attribution of effective state sponsorship from that aspect. And I believe it was Northrop Grumman that has, at least they wrote the thing on, I think, the third PLA and China's resources that my students have to read. And so, yeah, so again, you got to get back to proving it and linking it up for that aspect of it for that. So you've got to do that aspect. Yes, boy. So I'm on slide 6 of 150. We ain't going to get further. No. Yes. Okay, so I started with the Constitution, and now I'm into the United Nations. So on that slide, I talked about the Constitution, what a great document that is. But on the first slide for sources of authority, Constitution, statute, and I said international law, which is where you're getting it for the UN Charter from that aspect under international law. All right, so hold that. We'll get back. Who has the authority to declare war? Okay, so Congress by constitutional statutes. But case law says that the president doesn't have to sit here and take an attack and turn to Congress as missiles are flobbing in left and right and go, Congress, can you guys get out of the bunker over there? Because I got missiles coming in over here. I need you to declare war so I can respond. Case law, Constitution, Judiciary said the president does not have to wait when you're suffering an attack. we can respond, and that is his constitutional authority to respond to threats going on there without having to turn to Congress for a declaration of war. It's an interesting aspect from that. We're going to get in that a little bit later down the road here, so hold that. Why should I worry about the UN? Because it governs the relations of nation states and the use of force and codified customary international law. So that's why I'm going to worry about the UN Charter as an upstanding nation-state citizen of the world. We're going to make sure we're following the law of armed conflict, which basically is the aspect of saying we're going to follow the UN Charter for Article 2, 4, and 51 because we want everyone else in the world. President Kennedy gave a great speech as he was going off to be president called Beacon on a Hill. And that was the aspect of we don't lower ourselves to other people's standards. We want to raise our standards up. And just because somebody else isn't following certain standards, we're still going to follow the standards in hope, especially with like POW aspects, that they will follow and respect that. So under law of armed conflict, we are going to follow basically the UN Charter to refrain from the threat or use of force. I'm going to take this offline as we're going on this. Let me keep going, all right? Because I think they're going to want to go down this as opposed to moving into a UN Charter debate, which is always fun. So this is key. So General Alexander talked about there's no precise definition of a use of force in or out of cyberspace. So in the real world, physical world, same thing. And the aspect of who determines if we've been attacked, it is the President of the United States. He determines if it's such a scope, duration, and intensity that's going to take that cyber event and turn it, there was no bullshit on that one, by the way, and turn that cyber event and turn it into a response. When we do that, we apply the principles of the law of armed combat, or conflict. We're going to get back to these a little bit down the road when we talk about this thing on a Siemens platform that I can't mention that word up here because I get in trouble. So we're going to talk about combatants versus non-combatants, military necessity, what that means, proportionality, superfluous injury, indiscriminate weapons, and neutrality. So cyber war and the law of armed conflict. Law of armed conflict applies to air. It applies to sea. It applies to land. Never get involved in a land war in Asia. You fell for a classic blunder of all times on that. And it applies to space. It also applies to cyberspace operations. They even made a movie about it. It really was a terrible movie. Not to be confused with the show on TV. From that. Now, Ellen Nakashima got a hold of a White House document, and it said, basically, we've got to watch how we call this thing. And so the domains you have out there are land, air, sea, and space. Is cyberspace a domain? No, it is not. It is not a domain exactly the same as land, air, sea, and space. It is like it or similar to it, but it is not exactly like it. It is the same as far as organizing, training, and equipping, but it is not exactly the same because it's not an independent domain. I can have an air battle that doesn't affect the other domains. I can have a sea battle, but cyberspace, I'm always going to need another aspect in there. So these issues and these questions that I keep seeing articles written on, people need to do their research. They've been answered. DoD answered 13 specific questions on our cyber policy for both DoD and the U.S. government to Congress back in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011. All states possess that inherent right to self-defense. The President in the international strategy, and as we've also nested the DoD strategy underneath that, can use all means necessary to respond to actions, including cyber and kinetic. This isn't new. This is out there. Again, that's the international strategy, making it clear and informing the world. This is our strategy, that we can use all means necessary. Diplomatic, informational, the whole aspect that we use elsewhere. We are going to follow the law of armed conflict to prevent things from escalating the similar that we would in the physical domain in cyberspace. DoD has rules of engagement for the operation and defense of its networks. Espionage. We are going to follow the long standard practice and applicable laws dealing with espionage. There's no international consensus on the definition of what is a cyber weapon. So we're going to look to the law of armed conflict. An act of war or threat of use of force, again, we're going to apply the law of armed conflict. I'm going to make a paid public service announcement now. I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of really great, good government lawyers that get in a room and really argue like just cats and dogs over these issues like you can't believe. But they're very good at following the law of armed conflict and applying it to the fact patterns of this realm. This is not new. We've had military lawyers applying the law of armed conflict in the physical world since 1774. Again, no cyber operations back then. But now we're doing the same thing and applying it. So the issue becomes now, how do you deal with that anticipatory self-defense when I feel I've got a threat out there that's coming towards me? This nice gal, Leah Schloss, in the Georgetown Law Journal, wrote this law review article dealing with nuclear counterproliferation and the use of force in this age. The fact pattern should kind of stick out at you. So when you're looking at anticipatory self-defense, back in 81, Israel struck the Iraqi nuclear facility, and it was condemned uniformly by nation states as a use of force, including the United States. Then we went in Gulf War I and thought, wow, thank God they did that because we didn't realize they were so advanced on it. When they hit Syria in 2007, the world was quiet. Didn't say a whole heck of a lot. And so this law review article wants to look at the issues of how do you deal with this doctrine of anticipatory self-defense when I'm facing an imminent threat in the age of an aggressor state that may have a nuclear program. And it's fact-specific. If they are producing enough plutonium to power a power station from that aspect, looks like peaceful purposes. If they're doing enough that basically it's 500 times the amount that they need for that peaceful purpose, you've got a different fact there. And the commander who's responsible for that has to make a determination. So now if you're looking at the aspect here of Stuxnet, so Eric Jensen, a former military lawyer, looked at this and said, hey, this could be considered an armed attack. And if he's advising Iran, there might be enough there to respond. But it goes back to my imminent threat aspect. There has to be an ongoing threat and an imminent threat to respond. Interesting standard for that. Kate Janstrom down at Berkeley, and the question becomes, which is the better law school, Brigham Young or Berkeley? From that aspect. She says, I'm not sure that it qualifies as an armed attack. And what is the aspect of a use of force or an armed attack? Cyber Command's lawyer praises Stuxnet. Now, here's the fun aspect again. In his personal capacity at Georgetown back in March, again, so in his personal capacity, he's looking at this saying, something, when you look at this, it looks like a use of force in his personal capacity. When you leave this room, I didn't say anything there. I said Eric said something, Kate said something, and the U.S. Cyber Command lawyer, speaking in his personal capacity, said. So, John Richardson wrote this great aspect review on Stuxnet as cyber warfare, looking at distinction and proportionality. I said we would get to talking about this aspect. So, El Shifa Pharmaceutical Industries case is from a legal perspective, being the warped individual I am, a great case. This was President Clinton bombing a chemical weapons factory in the Sudan after the bombing of the embassies in Tanzania and Kenya on that. And those bombings were attributed to Al-Qaeda, and his intelligence folks said they're using a pharmaceutical factory in the Sudan to produce chemical weapons. There's an ongoing threat going there, so they went and bombed the thing. The pharmaceutical company came to the United States and sued the U.S. government under a Fifth Amendment taking claim that basically they wanted compensation that the U.S. government had, damaged their property, and they wanted damages for it. Now, the first aspect of this case was what President Clinton did is he notified Congress and went on air and gave his announcement for his rationale for doing this, which followed basically the whole aspects of imminent threat, necessity, proportionality aspect. There's an imminent threat. We suffered a hit. We're taking a proportional response. The necessity and the targeting aspect is a military target producing chemical weapons. So he tied it all together there and put the case forward. The appellate court here said, we have no review of a presidential constitutional decision of the designation of enemy property outside the United States. So when you're reading cases for law school and these, you get to what's called the holding. And that was the holding. They said, Marbury versus Madison, the branches of government all have their individual responsibilities. We are not going to rule. We have no role of judicial review for a inherently constitutional presidential determination, so we're not going to look at that for the designation of enemy property outside the United States. There's a thing called dicta, which basically they go on to, prolificate. Because they got to do something to justify their jobs. And they say, we are not ruling on whether he were to make a determination inside the United States of enemy property. So, going to the virtual, lawyers like sitting around arguing these things. Going to the virtual world, so if I'm going to knock out a server that's Oconus, the president apparently can go ahead and say, yeah, enemy property, knock it out, launch, have a good day. What if it's in Cupertino? What if it's in Denver? Can the president say, yeah, that's enemy property, that server, knock that thing out? I don't know. Not according to this case, but an interesting issue that us lawyers like to sit around and waste time arguing about. So this aspect here, when you're looking at applying the facts, and facts being king, you're looking at, is there an imminent threat from that aspect? And then what's the necessity of it for what you are targeting? The discriminant aspect, hey, when you look at Stuxnet, again, that thing was looking at that, for a Siemens system with the two subsystems either manufactured in Iran or Finland. So, that was a very discriminatory tool for what was going on. And as the Cyber Command lawyer said, as far as this was a model of responsibility in terms of that aspect. So, one aspect of going back to who gets to say, declare war, who gets to determine what actions you're going to take. And again, it goes back to the law of armed conflict. And by the way, this standard goes right down from a company commander who might be a captain to the president. So, basically, you've got to have the situation, based on the totality of the circumstances and the fact pattern put in front of you, and this was also said in Ashifa, because the plaintiffs in Ashifa wanted the court to say the president wasn't responsible when he took the information from his intelligence community, it was faulty, he shouldn't have relied on it, and they said, no, we're not going to get in that determination. That belongs to the president. And that's the aspect of it. Based on the totality of the circumstances of the information presented to you, you've got to make that determination. Now, by the way, international law, this standard doesn't exist anywhere in international law. Michael Schmidt, who's one of our leading writers in the area of law of armed conflict, his aspect is he'd like to see a clear and compelling standard which is below your preponderance of the evidence but not quite a reasonable doubt. But basically, they've got to make the determination and they're solely responsible for right there. We're going to tuck that solely responsible aspect away when we get to the hacking back aspect as we go down the road here. So, as I mentioned before, and I want to keep emphasizing this, cyberspace is no different as far as applying the law of armed conflict that already exists. There's no standard out there in or outside of cyberspace for what is that definition of a use of force. Should there be a treaty? There's 7 smart people up here who said, no. And then, Bruce is here, so you can go ask him why he said yes. And track him down in that aspect. But an aspect of that debate on whether there should be a treaty. Are we at cyber war? Is it going on? Are we going to see a cyber Pearl Harbor? I love this aspect on it. Apparently, I can go attack something now because yesterday, Senator Lieberman said, hey, a cyber attack could be imminent. So I guess he's meeting that standard for the law of armed conflict, and I like to stay current on that. Some folks here saying, no, cyber war will not happen. This particular podcast really hit it, and I have to cite something because I just can't pull something out of my butt. You're going to see cyberspace operations as enabling operations to military operations, but you're not going to see a cyber war per se. Again, the aspect of that. Again, citing other people smarter than I, Paul Rosenwig thinks, that this aspect of the threat, and it's kind of going towards the fear-mongering aspect on life, he's got a minority view. He goes, yeah, the cyber vulnerabilities are real, and there's no denying that. I like his point here when he says protecting, intellectual property. Lockheed Martin is probably more capable of doing that, than the government is for them. I kind of agree with that aspect, but again, it goes back to that sharing of information. And what do you know? If I'm the government and I know something, I should be sharing the information. But I hope to God, my bank is protecting my information better than, we'll leave it at that. This particular blog that came out was that aspect of fear-mongering versus those who aren't fear-mongering. And you got to decide where you come down on that debate. I'm a big fan of understanding who it is speaking. I mean, so if I'm watching Fox News, I know what their bent is. If I'm listening to the Colbert Report or Jon Stewart, I know what their bent is from that aspect of life. So people who are doing all the fear-mongering, you got to look at what is their job or what are they doing. If my job for 20 years is chief of counterterrorism, my job is to warn, keep clanging that warning bell. Be prepared, be prepared. And I've only got to be right once to be proven a god. And, and guess, in over 20 years, it's going to happen. I mean, you had Tanzania, you had Kenya, you had the 1993 bombing. I mean, so, it doesn't take a lot to clang that bell and be right. But the balance of what is going on between fear-mongering and not fear-mongering, that is the challenge that's out there. One of the last issues that's going on for computer network attack is the aspect of whose authority does it fall under. And Paul Walker, in his law review article, kind of looks at that, the debate between the CIA and the military service branches on whose role this really is to do this. So that's another aspect, another issue that's going on out there as we move forward. Legal aspects or issues of active response. This is the actual slide that I used in 2005 when I talked about active response. So I thought I would update it for 2012. And I will strike down with a vengeance. I'm sorry, I absolutely love that. So hacking back. Again, calling out your colleagues that you really want to put on the spot. Dave Wilson was a lawyer with me. He was at Colorado doing computer network operations law, and I was in DC. So, hey, if you go find him, apparently he's got some aspects of it being legal. Folks are looking to do this. Sean Henry was out here talking about it, so you got people saying, we want to get proactive on this. This blog here, points out some of the aspects. There's no castle doctrine. I can't, this isn't like defending my house. I'm going outside of my house. It's a no man's land on that. And even in this one, it goes, it's unclear to me what you stand to get by hacking back. What good could you possibly get? So I'm a sysadmin, and I work for a company, and I did this thing last year too, so if you're here, you're hearing it for a second time. I'm a sysadmin, it's 2 in the morning, I'm playing Portal or Call of Duty 3 killing zombies, and my IDS system goes off on an alert over here, and I look over at it, and I see a large exfiltration of data going out to an FTP server. And I dig in it a little bit, and I see that it's coming from my HR department, and I'm thinking, oh, hell, it's just probably personally identifiable information, and I go back to playing Portal or Call of Duty. And I'm good. Now, change the fact pattern again. I'm playing Portal, Call of Duty, and I see the exfiltration go out, and I look at it a little bit, and lo and behold, my company sucks. They haven't firewalled off the research and development. They don't use encryption at data at rest, and it's the research and development, and it's a big project, and all my intellectual property is going right out there. And what do I think is my first thought? If I pick up the phone and call the CEO, I'm frickin' fired. I'm out of a job. So what can I do? So I start digging into my logs a little bit more, and I see the FTP server where that went to. And it's an issue. It's not so much of an issue if it's CONUS or OCONUS, but let's just say it's in California. And I see it going there, and I dig a little further in my logs, and I see it's not an anonymous FTP server, and I see the password and the login for that. And I'm like, all right, here I go. And I think, well, I'm going to VPN to my home account because they're probably logging over there, and I don't want them to see me coming from my corporate account. So I VPN home, and I hop in there, use the login and the password, and I get on the FTP server. Congratulations, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, count 1. You had no authority to do that from that aspect of life. So you're in there, and you see your files there. And you're thinking, okay, great, I can get these off of here, so I'm going to get them off. So I've got to elevate my privileges to delete them off of there. Oh, by the way, if I'm going to elevate my privileges while I'm in there, I'm going to check out their logs to see who's coming in there and grabbing these things and seeing if I can get their IP address from where they took them back to. So you elevate your privileges while you're on there. Congratulations, count 2 of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. But you see where the IP address goes out, so you've got that, so you bring that back to your company. You delete the files that are there, and basically you're hoping and praying to God that whoever stole them will never actually have them turn up and use them, and you can go to your company and say, I protected us, we're safe. Now, oh, and by the way, you go to the legal firm, and your legal guys, and go, here's the IP address that took them. You may want to file a lawsuit against them, and you've got some great discovery stuff here, because if they say, oh, we don't have it, then we can throw it on the table in front of the judge, who, of course, then is going to ask, how'd you get that? And then you'll have to deal with that. So, what's the benefit of hacking back? From that aspect, there's a little benefit there. Now, like Sean Henry, I am not advocating, nor would I say you can violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and do that. But there's your benefit from that aspect. So, Sean's piece that he did here, he talks about beacons and disinformation. Sometimes you get lawyers arguing about different things and different aspects, and it gets to a point where somebody just stands up and goes, hey, has anybody said this is really stupid and it won't work? I'm not a fan of beacons. The aspect of the needle in the haystack of setting up a document with a beacon and actually having that document stolen and taken, maybe you can put it front and center so it's in part of it. So that's one aspect. But no self-respecting hacker is going to open up a document on their system, let alone being connected to the internet. So operationally, unless you can come up to me with a fact pattern to show me why it's going to work better, and you might very well do it, which, by the way, gets your lawyers involved early and often. And from that aspect, you might have a plan there from that aspect. The problem I've got with them is when you set up that thing to beacon back, you've set up a pen, trap, and trace device. And according to the statute, and this is an absurdity of the law, yes, this is asinine, not that this would ever happen in the law, no person may install or use a pen register or trap and trace device without first obtaining a court order. You can't do it. ISPs can do it because there's an exception, or providers of communication can do it. I can't do it under this statute. And if I get the consent of the user, I still can't do it because the consent goes to the ISP. And when I talked to DOJ and attorneys familiar with the matter, that's the argument they give me. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And James Baker, who was the Associate Deputy Attorney General testifying before the Senate, said the consent exception here goes to an ISP. If you're getting a threat here, you can't give it. I can't go to you and say, hey, you guys are tech savvy and you know what's going on. I'm getting email threats here. Can you set up a little pen, trap, and trace device for me so I can intercept this and find out who it is, take that information to law enforcement so they can do something? You can't do it under the way the law is. It's an absurdity of stupidity under our legal system. How does who? DRM? Good question. Yeah, well, lobbyist aspects. That's how did the music industry get away with it? Now, again, this is the aspect of digital rights management, which I always say, before I'm doing beacons, why don't you do some digital rights management and some encryption at rest? I apologize. I don't have an answer to that fact pattern. No, sorry. You get what you pay for. Disinformation. My aspect in disinformation is a simple thing. You still need to be careful with disinformation. If I'm, and I just did an interview with the Bloomberg folks, so I use an example of if I'm a soft drink company and I changed my formula a little bit so it tastes crappy when you steal it and try to make it, no big deal, no harm, no foul. So Sean used the example of the auto company. I'm a Chrysler kid. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. And big competition between Ford, Chrysler, and GM. So what about my disinformation there? So, hey, Jim, those blueprints on that new Chrysler 200 that's coming out, did you tweak them a little bit? Yeah, I did. What'd you do? Well, if you look at the door handle here, there's this little spot right underneath. What's that little spot right there about, an inch by an inch? That's where I put the C4. What? And now all of a sudden a bunch of cars are exploding on the Ford Proving Ground as I open in the doors. All right, you got to understand what you can and can't do with disinformation. You start causing harm, computer code industry, you start causing people's machine to steal it and they start damaging their equipment, you've got a different standard there. Keiko v. Brinney, again, going back to 2005, back in the 1970s, Ethel and whatever her husband's famous name was, had a farmhouse out back. They put a spring-loaded shotgun in an interior bedroom door because somebody kept going, they kept going trespassing on the property. The husband's got it aimed center mass, and the wife goes, honey, why don't you lower it down a little bit? So he lowers it down towards the ground, and sure enough, the plaintiff goes in there. Now when he stands on the right side, he's 6'4". When he stands on the left side, he's 5'8", because it blew away his ankle. And he sued, and he won a money judgment because, again, you can't just use self-defense without kind of thought process of what's going on to defend property. So disinformation, there's a balance there. Talk to your lawyers. What is it you want to do as far as that disinformation campaign? So I'm going to probably butcher the name. Iftach Ian Amit spoke earlier over there about using lawyers early and often. You got Ken Silva of Mantech talking about the legal pitfalls of these active defense aspects. Get a real lawyer. Get a real lawyer, not one that's going to say, no, you can't. You don't want that. By the way, that bus picture, if you're in trouble here, that's the back of a Las Vegas bus. You might want to take that number down. And that. But you don't need a lawyer that's going to say, no, you can't. You need a lawyer that's going to say, yes, you can. So find that lawyer. Find that lawyer out there that's going to say, yes, you can. Never thought I'd be on the same thing. Unless I did it, I wasn't going to be next to Barack. All right, now, your lawyer should never say, you can't do that. A lawyer never should say that. Your lawyer should provide you advice and get you to yes. Now, the lawyer needs to say, if you do this, yes, it's going to be a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. But if you do it this way, it will not be a violation of law. But are there policies out there that you must apply? A lawyer's job is to help you to get early and often and explain the technology. This is my Moore's Law moment. Clark's Law. You must explain the technology at a third grade level to your attorneys so they can understand it and turn around to a judge, jury, or senior leadership and explain it at a first grade level. From that aspect, because the responsibility goes back to that law of armed conflict. I'm the lawyer. At the end of the day, I'm going home and I'm having a steak dinner. All right, and this is back when I used to be a defense attorney in Korea, and I told my clients who committed crimes, dude, here's the government's case. They want to put you away for 4 years. I can get a deal for you for 6. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to go home and have a steak dinner. It's your decision from this aspect. I'm not the one going to the Huskow from that aspect of life. Same thing with individual companies. This is the aspect of lawyers provide you advice, and you have to determine what is the risk that you're willing to accept and what you're going to do when you're pushing the envelope on this aspect of hacking back. There are a lot of things that you can do. You've got to get a good lawyer who understands the technology and, as I said, is involved early and often so that you know what's going. Now, one other aspect. You've got to keep them involved, because if you put a device out there that's doing one thing over here and then you start changing some switches around, and 6 months down the road, as Steve Chabinsky, the former DOJ lawyer for FBI, says, now you've changed the way it looks. The whole fact pattern over here was here. Now you have it doing this over here. That violates the law. You've changed everything, and you didn't come back and talk to me. So include your lawyers in this for what you're doing. But the responsibility rests with the CEO of that company to make that determination. The lawyer, no lawyer, government, non-government, should say, no, you can't do that. You have to explain, get them to yes, explain why, but then the decision is made by somebody else. One aspect I like to point out, DoD regulations say, as far as this, computer network defense are actions taken within DoD systems. Very key. DoD is going to do things, computer network defense, within their systems, and it's conducted by multiple disciplines with multiple authorities to do what it is they have to do, between law enforcement, CERTs, NOSCs, counterintelligence, and even the president from that aspect. Hacking back. So I'm either misperceiving something on the Core Flood botnet takedown that people are saying here. What I've heard this week since I've been here is that DOJ went out, touched machines, and cleaned people's machines for them. Attorneys that I know, familiar with the matter, say that is highly wrong. That did not happen. This was a civil action. It was not a criminal action. DOJ went in and got a temporary restraining order to do this aspect, citing special needs that were responsible to protect the aspect with a threat that was out there, the 2 million machines, blah, 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 cats and dogs living together. And so they got authorization to do this. They did not, and were not authorized to go out and touch people's machines. They were authorized to set up another server, and when those machines came and talked in, they told them, don't, we're killing it right here, we're not sleeping. But they didn't clean the machines. Worse of this, actually, they had an opt-out provision in this, so if your machine's messed up, you could opt out and say, no, 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 I want my machine to stay dirty from this aspect. So if it comes down to a criminal element in DOJ, hey, give me the criminal element 4 out of 5 times, because if I get TDL4 on there, they're going to clean the viruses off of my machine and clean it up for me, so theirs is the only one on it, so it doesn't beacon out and give them up. So actually, the criminal elements are cleaning my machines on there, but DOJ won't clean the machine for me. So from that aspect, hey, I like the criminal aspect of it, because at least they're cleaning my machine. I just have to worry about what TDL4 is doing. You're still here. Hey, we're moving into computer network exploitation. I didn't think I'd get here, but then again, I did kind of stifle the questioning aspect on life. You've got 10 fingers up. That means 10 minutes. That doesn't match. All right, so computer network exploitation. Spying. Hey, everybody does it. It's a good thing. Is it illegal? It ain't illegal. Spying is not illegal under international law. Not at all. Everybody does it, and under international law, it is an accepted practice. Again, as long as I have no destructive acts, no sabotage, I'm just collecting intelligence, I have not violated international law. I am violating a whole host of domestic law for different victim nations, but under international law, hey, it's not illegal. But does it come to that aspect of a use of force? And Gary Sharp, DOD's lawyer for this, wrote a great book on this aspect of it, and he's talking about what's your use of force. Well, if I've got a U-2 flying over your country, hey, you can use reasonable force, proportional force, to get me the heck out of there from that aspect and get me out of your national airspace as I'm spying on you. So you can use a use of force from that. And so as you're at your parties tonight, you can say, hey, did you know spying? Tu coquille. Everybody does it. You got a nice little French word, there, hey, tu coquille. Everybody does it from that aspect of life. So, again, now the other aspect of spying. Hey, physical spying, if I'm in your country, you're going to put the habeas corpus on me, and I'm going to find myself probably, can you imagine some very uncomfortable positions? Probably not without slides. I don't have those slides. But if I find myself behind a victim nation there and they grab me, hey, I can be prosecuted. If I'm a self-respected, decent computer network exploiter, I better not be in their country as I'm doing it. I can do it from thousands of miles away. I could even do it from the islands of Hawaii and be enjoying life and give the results to somebody else. But I'm not going to be present in that country, so I'm really not going to have to worry about the habeas corpus. Computer network security and defense. And probably Tom Cruise hanging there was probably more of an attack, so I probably shouldn't be there. Again, Sean Henry, got to quote your keynote speakers whenever you can. How to defend against a cyber attack. What are you guys doing here? I mean, we've gone through everything. This is stuff you guys, old hand stuff. You guys should be going out. Unless you want to ask questions, I can just stop. Computer network defense. Hey, it's based on your trespass chattel we talked about and statutory law. You can use reasonable force to protect your property. The law prefers prevention, security, defense of your systems, as opposed to post-trespass recovery. I had a problem with that when I said that I was practicing a little while ago too. So the aspect is, I want you to lock up your lawnmower, but when your neighbor comes over and borrows it, I don't want you to go into his property at 2 in the morning and grab it and cause a nice little ruckus that the cops are going to show up on. Again, preventive measures for security. So you're in a place, you have the right to be proportional for what you're looking at. Now, from our aspect, as you all know, we've got the privacy and civil liberties concerns, so we've got logon banners, warnings, acceptable use policy. This thing has been well documented as far as what we're talking about here. The consent aspect to going and doing this and monitoring as much as we want. And when we get past, your memorandum statement, when we roll out Einstein 2, Office of Legal Counsel from DOJ wrote the 2 different memorandums there dealing with the legal issues that we're going to go and put an intrusion detection system out there from that aspect. And getting down to the part there where if you don't have consent, 2511, 2 little a little I is a service provider exception. If you're a provider of communication services, you can protect your system. Comes out of the Captain Crunch cases with the good old blue whistle, or the whistle with the blue boxes. And this is the aspect is I just got to tailor my monitoring to the threat that I'm faced with right there. Sir, is that a beer? Oh man, that would be great. Now, going back to the aspect of the folks doing this. You've got multiple disciplines doing your computer network defense, both in government and out of government. You've got your network ops, your intel, cops, all that. You get a phone call at 2 in the morning. Hey, sir. Actually, you get it at 2 in the afternoon. one of our sensors just popped for porn. I'm like, wait, move the user away from the computer, tell them to go have an early lunch, and you pick up the phone, you call your cops, because it's a crime. And the cops say the same thing. Was it child porn? I don't know, I didn't look at it. They're like, well, go look at it. And you're like, oh, great. And they hang up. They call the sysadmin up and go, was it child porn? And they're like, I don't know, I didn't look at it. I'm like, hey, go look at it. And I get to hang up. And they go look at it, and it's not child porn. You call the cops back. Now they don't care. They're gone. And now it's no longer a crime. It's just, it's an employment aspect, a violation of acceptable use policy. So from that aspect, it shows who's going to take the crime, the jurisdiction over the event. Now you get like a foreign IP address coming in at you. From the government aspect in life, that's counterintelligence. They're going to say foreign threat, foreign threat. But my cops are going to say, no. Any unauthorized access is a crime. I have jurisdiction over it. And you just got people who want the box clean, put back online so they can get the jobs done again. So again, while you're doing computer network defense, all these folks are going to play as you're going forward on it. I did not think I would get here. This is Bob Clark's view of the world of what I would like to see. One of the great jobs, well, every job I had in the military was a great job. At least that's what I was told. The best job, so two best jobs I had were at the Computer Network Operations Command, and the other one was at DoD's Counter-Drug Command, back when war on drugs was hot, Bush 1. And Congress created high-intensity drug trafficking areas, and what it was were 8 different HIDAs across the United States, New York, Los Angeles, Houston, southwest border, where drugs are at. And basically what it was a mechanism to fund federal funding into federal, state, and local entities. And it was great, and Congress bought into it. They bought into it so much that after about 3 years of having 8 HIDAs, it expanded to 31, including one in West Virginia, because there's huge meth problems in West Virginia. Who knew? So basically right now, you've got the NKIC. I had to clean this up because I used to call it the US CERT. And there's one over there. I'd love to see, as far as the federal funding aspect of 5 of them located around the country. Because here's one aspect. People in D.C. think everybody wants to come and work in D.C. And people outside of D.C. don't want to come in to the beltway of D.C. Actually, the military is the same way. There are people who do tours their entire life in D.C. and people who do tours outside and never go in. So if you spread this around here and focus each one of these on a different threat, New York could be like the financial sector aspect of life, and do high-intensity cybersecurity areas. Sorry about the acronym, it's the best I can do. But if you set that up with federal funding, Congress would buy off on that in a heartbeat. Tie 10 states to each one of them or something, you're going to get funding going from that aspect. Well, you guys probably have jobs, but you create more jobs. Again, the problem is now we have less qualified people working different places. But, again, they're all integrated with the different ISACs and different threats out there. Hey, it's kind of a neat way to go from that. Fully funded, redundancy, the whole aspect of it, that's kind of the aspect of it. So, I have 2 minutes and 11 seconds left. Questions? So your question going on this is the aspect of TJAC for the Air Force said, putting code on your system is not a use of force from that aspect. And if I put tanks in your country, see, there's the fun aspect of the computer network operations world. How do I know there's not a logic bomb in that code from that aspect there? And you're right, I don't. Facts are king. Right now, if I'm seeing collection and exploitation, that's what I'm going on. But that huge aspect is, the one aspect that is different than the physical world is, how do I not know that there's a logic bomb there? But however, if I see the codes there and I'm cleaning my machines, then hopefully I've taken care of that logic bomb too. Any other questions?
Yeah, right here.
Go ahead.
So, along the same lines, what about when hacking back? What about putting a die pack in some of the...
The die packet and the aspect of the code going back.
Right?
What authority do you have? Okay, so here's the aspect. It goes back to that Keiko v. Briney thing. I mean, again, what's your intent when you put that there? My intent is that someone's going to grab it and I'm going to melt their machine from their aspect, from that when I hack back. Now, okay, first aspect. Is there going to be a victim that's going to complain about that? It goes back to, the Princess Bride. You're trying to take what I've lawfully stolen. I mean, so the aspect of that one, where's your victim on this? So there's an aspect of that. However, break, if you set something up and your intent is someone steal it to melt their machine, Your intent is to violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act because you're hoping that code's going to be taken and go there. With that said, there's a case out there of a guy, again, going back to the die marker aspect on life, who worked for the postal company, and again, they put a beacon in the actual envelope that belonged to the postal company. No harm, no foul, because it belonged to the postal company. It is a very difficult aspect of putting code on your machine that you're as a defensive mechanism. If someone steals it, that's contraband. So the question becomes, all right, so if I'm going to protect my car, can I put my car alarm on there that when you open that car door between the hours of 10 and 2, it explodes? Kind of a little excessive use of force in terms of the threat that you're faced with. So the question becomes, what else could you do that's less the aspect of destroying somebody's machine for what your threat is? If it's a business, my aspect is use data at rest, air gap your intellectual property. What are the steps that you've done to minimize your risk and your exposure? Because if you do something like that, then if I find myself in front of a judge, I can say, Judge, here are all the steps that my company took to reduce my risk. And this was the last one I had to do here. It melted his computer. Hey, I'm really sorry, but I took all these steps to keep them out, and they still came from this aspect. I don't see a victim here, Your Honor. And then again, I don't know what their response is. But the risk is on business to make that determination. Question. Automated hackbacks? So, I mean, that's, everyone wants to look at that next new technology, so it's operating at the speed of net for an automated response. Is it there? You guys have to tell me. You got to give me about, here's what we can do, here's what I'd like to do. I got a minute 20. Oh, I'm over. It's going up. All right. I guess that means I'm over. I'm up here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you. Go Blue.